This is Lynda Wright from Randolph-Macon College. Welcome to Macon Memories. Today is April 30th, 2011, and I'm at the Jefferson Hotel in Richmond, Virginia. I'm with Dr. Doug Lawson, Randolph-Macon class of 1957, and Mr. Haywood Payne, Randolph-Macon class of 1968. Dr. Lawson, you graduated from Randolph-Macon College in 1957. Give us a bit of background about your experience as an undergraduate student and your graduate studies.
Well, I came to Randolph-Macon from Newport News, Virginia. I went to Warwick High School, and I came as a scholarship student. I have to say that I didn't have any money, and thanks to people like Dr. A. Purnell Bailey, who's now deceased, and others, they gave me scholarships in Randolph-Macon. They gave me scholarships, and then I did jobs and things like that. I was able to work my way through. But I wanted to be a Methodist minister. And so the Methodist Church was growing like wildfire at that time, and they needed what they called accepted supplies. I was not a seminary student. I had not been ordained. But the Virginia Conference of the Methodist Church made me an accepted supply. So one of the ways that I worked my way through Randolph-Macon while I was a student was I became minister, pastor, founder of a church in Hampton, Virginia called Bethany Methodist Church, which is a great big Methodist church now. It was really a cornfield when I started out. And while I was at Randolph-Macon, on the weekends, I would get in the car and drive back to Hampton, Virginia with my family, and would preach and raise money and do all kinds of crazy things. And it was a wonderful 3 years. I must say that I've been back to the 50th anniversary of the church. I preached there at the time, and it was quite an experience. There was a lady in a wheelchair, and she was pushed by a really good-looking young man, and she said, "Doug, do you remember me?" And of course, I do not remember a lady in a wheelchair, but then I looked at her face, and I did remember her. And she said, "I wouldn't have missed today for anything." And so she said, "This is my son, and he has something to give to you." So he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out a baptismal certificate. He was the first baby that I ever baptized 50 years before. But that's what I was doing while I was a student. I was very busy pastoring this church that I built. I left them with 450 members, and the rest is history. I then went to Drew University in Madison, New Jersey, where I studied to be a Methodist minister. And in 1960, after finishing Drew, I came back to Virginia Conference. I was ordained as a Methodist minister. And then I went to Duke University, and there I got a PhD in history and religion. And at 1962, Dr. J. Earl Moreland called me up and asked me, would I come to Randolph-Macon, my alma mater, and be the first full-time chaplain? I said, wow, that was quite something. I felt honored and challenged, and I said yes. So I came back, and they didn't even have a chaplain's office. They'd never been a chaplain at Randolph-Macon. But guess what? They made me an office in the old chapel, which had been there for years. And so I had two really wonderful years as the chaplain at Randolph-Macon College. Now, during that time, you've got to understand, when I was at Drew, I was taught, and obviously I'm a white Southern boy from Newport News, Virginia, a segregated background. Everything about my life was wonderful, but it was segregated. The church was segregated. The schools were segregated. And so I'm at Drew, and I'm being taught social ethics. Social ethics was taught to me by a gentleman named George Kelsey from Yale University. He happened to be black. I never had a professor, male or female, ever to teach me. Well, he taught me social ethics, and he changed my life. In essence, little did I know what was to come. But when I got to Randolph-Macon, that was a part of my ministerial background. And so I began to question they are petitioned the Board of Trustees that we ought to integrate this school. And I have to say that behind the scenes, I think I was a little bit behind that. I hope a lot behind it, but let's say the students did it. It was not a petition for me. Well, that came to the Board of Trustees, and they sort of said they might be interested in that, but they weren't doing anything. So I went to Dr. Moreland when I was Dean of Men, which was a couple of years later, and said, I think we ought to do something. And he said, well, Doug, we don't really know what to do. What do you suggest? And I came up with a suggestion that we go to a fabulous black university in Richmond, Virginia, Virginia Union, and go to the president and say, can we get the best 2 rising junior students, and we'll give them full scholarships to come to Randolph-Macon as the first black students at Randolph-Macon. And he said, well, that's good, but you do it, Doug. And so I went to Dr. Henderson's office, shut the door, made the proposition to him, and he thought that that was a good idea. He said, let me see what I can do with it. And of course, the result was a gentleman named Payne, who was a rising junior student, who came to Randolph-Macon, and the rest we'll let HAP talk to y'all about in a little bit. But my feeling is that I remember, boy, this was 1966, you know. The Supreme Court decision was just 12 years earlier. And it's no doubt in my mind that a lot of people, and some trustees resigned when we formally did this, that I was kind of persona non grata. I was on the side where people were really critical of me. And you know what? I basically was happy about that, because this was a fulfillment of what my commitment was as a minister, and hopefully as a Christian. And forget being a minister, just that seemed like to me to be the right thing to do. But there's a further ending to the story, which HAP came, and I'm so sorry that I was not the Dean of Men at the time, because we didn't get a chance to interact. And he can talk about being a student at Randolph-Macon, because I was the Vice President for Development. I was off raising money, first with Dr. Moreland and then with Dr. Luther Wright as the president of the last 2 years. But in 1969, you know, I was all set to become a college president. I was offered several college presidencies. I've been very successful in raising money. But in 1968, you remember Martin Luther King was killed, and Bobby Kennedy was killed, and the country was in chaos. And I got a phone call from Washington, D.C. from John Gardner, who had been head of the Carnegie Foundation and also had been head of HEW. He said, Doug, I hear you're quite a fundraiser. I've got something I'm trying to do here in Washington. Would you come to Washington and talk to me? So I went up to Washington, and John Gardner offered me the job of being his fundraiser at the National Urban Coalition. And so I left academia with a PhD. You know, I was no longer Dr. Lawson, you know. I was just Doug, which is what I am anyway. And so there I started raising money. But there, fate would have it that John Gardner asked one other person to help him raise money. His name was Walker Williams. And Walker Williams is also blessed with being a black man and from New Jersey, grew up with Dionne Warwick. He became my closest friend in the world, and to this day, he's my closest friend in the world. And then Walker and Doug, with no money, with a lot of nonsense, but we formed a company called Lawson and Williams. And we were the only black-white fundraising firm on earth. The Smithsonian hired us. The United States Capitol Historical Society hired us. Every black college, Shaw, Hampton, Virginia Union, they all hired us to raise money. And so it was my privilege after HAP and after George Kelsey to go on. And to this day, I'm proud of all the, and I've raised billions of dollars, all the thousands of clients I work with. And we've had the privilege of working in Africa for Nelson Mandela, where it just started an account in India, and et cetera. But that's my experience, and it all started at Randolph-Macon with a little guy with a church in Hampton, Virginia, continued with enlightenment from George Kelsey from Yale, who taught me at Drew, to the chance to preach to students at Randolph-Macon about integration, which was a bad word at the time, and then to see the dream come true through HAP.
Thank you so much for giving us that background and that story. I want to pick up the story, I guess, in the summer or spring of 1966, or before you entered Randolph-Macon in the fall, and let you tell us what was happening on your end. And do you remember how you were approached? And if you can tell your part of the story now. Thank you.
Certainly, yes. First of all, I'm really impressed to hear the other side, the background to my being selected. I was contacted in the summer of 1966. As a matter of fact, it was a very mysterious phone call from the president's office at Virginia Union. And I was working in Washington, D.C. on a construction job at the time. Received this call, and it was just a message. It said, call the president's office. And I thought, oh my goodness, now what have I done? Yeah. Because you just don't get calls from the president of the university. Well, I finally got in contact with Dr. Henderson, and he said, I have an opportunity for you. He says, but it is a very delicate situation, and you'll be contacted by Dr. Lawson at Randolph-Macon College. So now I'm still wondering, what is this about? I did reach, at least I did talk with some people at Randolph-Macon. I talked to Dr. Lawson, and he said, I have an opportunity, and the opportunity is that we'd like for you to come to Randolph-Macon. Now, I was a rising junior at Virginia Union University. I knew that the reason why I was selected was because I had the highest grade point average in the college at the time for 2 years, freshman, sophomore. And I was a chemistry major. So one of the things that Dr. Henderson told me was that Randolph-Macon wanted someone who had a very good opportunity to succeed. Did not want someone who would go there and fail, because that could really set back this whole process. But I wasn't thinking in global terms. I wasn't really thinking large about this. I thought, right now, I was struggling to pay college tuition as well, and here's an opportunity for me to get a full tuition scholarship. So from a pragmatic perspective, I thought this was a good idea. Now, what I didn't think through was some of the difficulties that I would encounter once I got to Randolph-Macon. But having attended, I went to parochial school for 12 years, started with Vandy Viver Elementary School, which was established in 1887. And it's, as a Catholic, it was the only school that black Catholics could attend in terms of elementary school, so in Richmond, Virginia. Then I went to Cathedral Central High School, which was the bishop's school in Richmond, Virginia. And this was a school of only about 100 students, and there were 4 black students in the school. I was one of 2 in my class, and there were some challenges there too. But the point is that I was used to attending an academic environment in which I was certainly the minority, and I was used to dealing with some of the challenges that come with that. So I thought, I think I can do this Randolph-Macon thing. But again, and then there was certainly a lot of encouragement from people around me, But from my perspective, it wasn't about breaking the color barrier. I was thinking, I can go to college. Randolph-Macon is a great school. I was aware that in my field, which was chemistry, that Randolph-Macon, because it was better endowed than Virginia Union University, I would have access to equipment and facilities that I only had seen in books or had read about at Virginia Union in our chemistry classes. So I thought this would be a great opportunity. So that's when I decided to go. Then I had this one uncle who quoted Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, a pendulum does not move on its own. The pendulum change does not move on its own. Somebody has to push it. He says, you have the opportunity to push it. Well, that just sort of went over my head. I'm thinking, that's very esoteric. I just need in my family to have a college education, And this was the best way for me to do that without having to work every night someplace to come up with the, at that time, $279 per semester to go to Virginia Union. So that's the reason why I accepted. Now, I did have some regrets because I was the rising junior president of class, and I felt that I had let my class down. The lady whom I eventually married, Alice Myers, happened to be Miss Junior at Virginia Union University, so we were sort of moving together as a couple back in those years. We'd now been married for 40 years. So I felt as I was leaving something behind, and there were a number of people at the university who discouraged me. They said, "You don't know what you're getting into. This could be a very dangerous situation for you, not only academically, but physically." And I was on the track to receive what I call the black equivalent of the Phi Beta Kappa. It's called Alpha Kappa Mu in the black, predominantly black colleges. So I thought, but yeah, Phi Beta Kappa, ooh, that's out there. That would really be a good thing to achieve in a college where it was sanctioned to award Phi Beta Kappa keys. So I took all of that information to heart and decided I'd make the commitment to go to Randolph-Macon because I really thought I could get by this. Having lived in two societies, black society and white society, and leaving the white academic society, in which I was a minority, and moving back to the comfort of a black society, of which I was a part, I thought I can deal with this. And that if things got too tough, I would simply go back. I always had the option to go back to Virginia Union. I always had the safety of my family to go back there if things got too difficult. But I truly underestimated what I was getting into. And then when I arrived, Dr. Lawson, although it met Dr. Dean Andrews, but Dr. Lawson was off in another assignment. And I thought, uh-oh, the only person I've talked to is Dr. Lawson.
I really let him down.
And where is he? So I show up on campus, and some people said, "Well, why are you here?" Campus security stopped me and said, "You don't belong here." And I'm thinking, but Dr. Lawson said, well, Dr. Lawson isn't here right now. He's off doing something else. So I thought, oh boy.
Tell us about when you first arrived on campus and what your impressions when you first came to campus.
I first came to campus, well, I had visited the campus earlier, not necessarily in the cover of darkness, but I did take a look at the campus. I thought it was a beautiful campus. I met Dean Andrews, and he gave me a further tour of the campus, and then he gave me some insights on not necessarily the selection process that helped me get there, but the vetting process in terms of my coming and where I would live. I moved into the Bennett Hall, which was then the newest of the motel dorms at the edge of campus. Every student in Bennett Hall had been vetted to determine whether or not they'd be willing to live in a dormitory with a black student. My roommate, Charlie Rippon, who was one of the Reese family and Hershey, was vetted. He was the captain of the football team. He was also a Catholic, as I. And so he was the one who was most challenged and asked the question, "Are you willing to share a room with a black student?" Charlie said, "What do I care? You know, I'm from Pennsylvania. I went to school with black kids all my life. I don't worry about that." So that was, I think that situation really helped facilitate my getting acclimated to the campus, because in interacting with that dorm, in which I had a lot of support, took a little time to build those relationships, but particularly with Charlie, and hanging out with the football team gave me a cadre of support. Because as I walked across campus, there was a lot of heckling, a lot of the N-word. Being in the Bennett Hall, someone threw a rock through our glass window, one of the window to the dormitory. And of course, Charlie went outside and raised hell about it, frankly, and those people went away. But there were challenges. You know, for instance, I could not study in the library. You would think that the library would be a place where you could go and you'd have peace and quiet, and you could, but as soon as I walked through the door, then the N-word was yelled. So I would make a U-turn and go back out, because that was not a comfortable zone for me. Went back to the door, and, but as I said, I had built relationships with the people there, and they had been vetted, so that worked okay. The other significant things that happened were around some of the coursework, some of the classes, because as a rising junior, there were classes that I needed to have, but the professors in those classes refused to teach me. They said,
Oh, my
I'm not
gosh.
having him in my class. And as I walked down the corridors, passing by some of these classrooms, if the door was open, the professors would say, there's that young buck, he shouldn't be here. And I would hear this. So I went back to Dean Andrews. I said, I can't do this. This is just too much. I'm really not welcomed here. I can handle the students, because unless they approach me physically, and then I had a backup plan, and I'll get to that later. But I said, if the professors don't want to teach me, then that's a little bit difficult. And he said, well, then some of those courses you will not have to take. So I really concentrated on the sciences, and the chemistry and physics and those courses, where I was welcomed in the scientific community because they look beyond that. Now, the irony is that courses in sociology and ethics, those were the courses from which I was banned. And I thought, this is an irony of sorts, because you would think that in sociology and ethics that they would welcome, a person of a diverse background to share experiences and just to be open and honest, and that simply didn't happen. So I didn't take those courses. So I've never had a sociology course. I don't regret it, because I wasn't going to go in a classroom and be harassed, because then I knew I would be in more difficulty. So that sort of is a synopsis of my initial experiences and impressions about Randolph-Macon.
Thank you. Did you, just as you were settling in, how about the dining hall experience? Or you said you hung out the dorm, but what about other places on campus you feel like?
Well, everywhere I went, the dining hall, the dining hall is very interesting. There was some heckling in the dining hall, but any place I went on campus after a while, I had a cadre of people with me. So I had my own little group. So when I went to the dining hall, we went as a group. For instance, as I left the dorm, some of my dorm mates would say, you ready to go to have lunch, or you ready to go to have dinner? And we'd go, and it'd be a group of about 7 or 8 of us. But I never went to the dining hall by myself. Yeah. And so that was very fortunate. Now, the other thing about the dining hall was I built a relationship with the people in the cafeteria. Not only the people in the cafeteria, but the groundskeepers, because they were all black. And they were happy to see me there. So I did get special favors. I would get the largest portions of food. The group that I went with was always served well. They could get the extra chicken leg and things like that. So then my little entourage grew, because they said, well, HAP gets all the good food. But that was a comforting situation for me too, because I knew also that was yet another backup plan for me. I felt safe, because many of those folks who lived in Ashland said, if you ever feel unsafe or you feel someone's bothering you, just walk down the street, and you're welcome to our homes, and we'll protect you. So that was plan 1. Plan 2 was, because I had pledged a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, before I went to Randolph-Macon. Then I had a cadre of brothers in Richmond, Virginia, but then Alpha Phi Alpha was the first black fraternity established in 1903. And there are chapters all around Virginia. And I was told, if you get into any difficulty, we will come to campus. Now I thought, that's nice to know, but that would really be a situation that was going to be untenable and unmanageable, and I really didn't want that to happen. But I knew that if push came to shove, a little Virginia expression, that was an option, which I certainly chose not to use, nor did my parents say, just don't do that. You don't want to go there. Because that would be an expectation. That would be a self-fulfilling prophecy in the minds of some people. So I tried to low profile and manage the situation myself, using the resources in campus. With Dean Andrews, Dr. Pennell, who was my faculty advisor, Dr. Stewart Monroe. He was very supportive. Dr. Stewart Monroe, in chemistry, I think it was his first or second year there, whom really helped me out in difficult times. Now, I did in my junior year, I also bought a little car, purchased a little Corvair, and had that on campus because I needed to get back and forth to Richmond. Because when I really felt distressed, I knew I could go back to Virginia Union. That's where I socialized for the most part, although I did socialize with Lambda Chi Alpha. That was
that's
Ripon's
right.
fraternity.
Yeah.
So I would hang out over there in that frat house with all the footballers. But one evening, someone put sugar in the gas tank in my car, and it was a convertible, and they cut the roof. And that sort of put me in the tank, too, but I rose above it. And Dean Andrews helped out. He met me one evening. He called me about 8:30 because he found out what had happened. We called the police, and they said, we don't care about this. You know, he shouldn't be here anyway. And he gave me two $100 bills. And he said, get your car fixed. So that, again, gave me some support because I didn't have two pennies to rub together to do anything. And now I've got this car in the lot that I can't do anything with. And then I was truly trapped. The only way for me to get out of the campus, which I did for a while, was to walk down to Route 1 and catch a Greyhound bus. But that walk from Bennett Hall down to Route 1 was precarious because there were people along the way who felt I shouldn't be at the college, and I never knew if somebody was going to be waiting for me.
Were you ever physically threatened?
I was physically threatened, not directly, other than the rock through the window and the harassment from voices whom I did not see. And then the Klan met off campus, and I could see them from my window, and I was very concerned about that. But I think that was the evening where many of the football players were in the dorm with the rest of us, sort of watching this activity until they were run off by, I think, Virginia State Police.
Was there a point where you felt you turned a corner and that the harassments stopped, or that you were accepted, that you can remember, or did it just gradually?
Yes, I think that point was in my senior year, because by that time I was no longer a novelty. There was one other black student there, but as a rising senior and having already completed 1 year, I was pretty well known around campus, and I'm a fairly nice guy. I'm easy to get along with. So, and then of course I had all the contacts in the cafeteria, so I was doing well in the dining hall. But I think I sort of turned the corner then. We got a new set of people in the dormitory. No longer was it a necessity for people to be vetted to determine whether or not they were willing to share a dormitory with a black individual. As a matter of fact, the new black student who came in just happened to be in the same dorm with me, so I'm sure that was planned so that I could mentor him to some extent. He left after I graduated in '68. He left in '69 because he was there by himself. He felt he couldn't address, and he came in as a freshman, so I came in as a rising junior, so I had some knowledge about what to expect, and I'd already established myself at another college. But this young man came in as a freshman, and he had difficulties with his freshman class. The other thing I think is that many of the seniors who were seniors when I arrived in '66 had graduated, and that's where a lot of the resistance was. So that cadre of people moved off. Now I'm a senior, and I'm working with people whom I knew and with whom I'd shared classes. I think that worked out. But there were some delicate moments, and I think, as I recall, the event that most troubled me and hurt me, frankly, was Parents' Weekend. My junior year there, we had Parents' Weekend, so of course, I invited my parents to come onto campus, and we're in a dining hall, and a number of the parents of students came over to my mother and dropped their food trays in front of her and asked her to take it to the kitchen. And I said, I'm a student here, and this is my mother. They said, well, we don't care. You shouldn't be here, and we want your mother to clean up this mess. And that hurt me. I was livid. And from that day until I graduated, I did not want my parents on campus. Because respect, and you do not, under any circumstances, treat your elders with disrespect, and certainly not your parents. And when others who didn't know me from Adam and didn't show the respect to my mother and my parents. That really burned me. I was ready to go that day. But having said that, I did feel that in the senior year turned the corner. And at my graduation, my parents were back on campus, of course, and they were welcomed to graduation not only by the administration and faculty, but by other parents. And then when I walked across the stage to get my diploma, I got a standing ovation from my graduating class, which touched me deeply. 104 people in the graduating class. And that in retrospect made me sense that all of this was worthwhile. But never was it in my mind to attempt to break a color barrier. I went because I felt that was a way to save money, and I was supporting my family anyway. And it really worked out for me. And then there were blessings that accrue from that.
I'll follow up on some of those blessings too, but I did have one question. Dr. Lawson had said when you approached Virginia Union, you wanted to get the top 2 students to transfer in, thinking I'm sure that 2 would be easier for both students. But it's the yellow jacket and everything you said indicates that you were the only one who came. Can you talk about that at all, or do you know who the other one was?
No, I don't. I don't know who the other student was.
No, I don't either. I asked for 2, and I think that it ended up that they can only find HAP are willing to do this. That's my guess. I never talked to Dr. Henderson about that, but that was just my idea of the 2. And I thought it would be good to have 2 students, hopefully from the same school that who would know each other. But I think that what happened was HAP was identified, and HAP said, "I'll do it." And I'm sure probably somebody else was identified, and they said, "No, I'm not going to do it." I don't know that that's true or not.
I was wondering if you could talk about any mentors. You mentioned a chemistry professor and anybody that you, especially just as far as your coursework, if you wanted to talk about how maybe in classes, just how that worked out. Was it very different, or were academics a place that you could retreat that was just familiar?
Yes, the academics, that was a place where I could retreat, particularly in the sciences. I took a number of courses in chemistry beyond what I needed to graduate. And as I mentioned, Dr. Stuart Monroe, who was a new professor at that time, he came in and taught biochemistry. And he befriended me and supported me in the chemistry line, and gave me very good counsel and helped me as I applied to medical school, because that was where I wanted to go after leaving Randolph-Macon. So he was my source there. Now, in the chemistry department, I think we had a very strong bond. In my P-Chem class in my senior year, there were only 4 students in that class. And although we were different in many respects, we shared a common challenge, and that was Dr. Frank Bullrich, who taught P-Chem. I don't know.
He was tough.
He was tough, and there's a history there that has nothing to do with race or gender. He was just tough, but he was excellent. Really challenging. So I think what happened in that particular chemistry major, we all bonded very close because it was us against Bullrich, and that worked. That builds camaraderie too, because you had a shared objective. You want to do your best. You want to graduate. You want to perform well. At the same token, you've got this monster of a guy who's brilliant and extraordinary professor, but indeed a challenge. So Stuart Monroe helped me with Bullrich. And then, of course, Dr. Pannell, he was always there as my academic advisor and helped me navigate through the various courses that I could take and those which I could not take. And he would just tell me in advance. I wouldn't even try. He says, there are things that I know about this that you don't want to know. Now, interestingly enough, my favorite courses, certainly with the Bible, was one. I had a very good Bible instructor who had been there for 100 years. I can't think of his name right now, but
Terry.
That's
Dr.
right,
Terry.
Dr. Terry. That's exactly right. He was wonderful, compassionate. I enjoyed the Bible, for a variety of reasons. The Bible to me, as a Catholic, I sort of knew it backwards and forward, but I was one of those people who enjoyed reading the Iliad, the Odyssey, and the Aeneid. And I view the Bible in the same way because there's such great stories. So I've had a bond with Dr. Talley. Mm-hmm. And then the other was psychology, because that was the place where I was able to venture out and sort of push that pendulum to get it to move. And I could speak to situations and to perceptions and to my perspectives in a class where I was the only black student. And we had very healthy dialogue in psychology, and that dialogue was welcomed. And I befriended a number of people in the class as a result of that. So the chemistry, Bible, psychology, those are my favorites.
Hap, what happened? Did you get Phi Beta Kappa?
No.
Okay.
No, and I'll tell you why. My understanding when I transferred to Randolph-Macon was that I would be an exception, that my grades would transfer as earned at Virginia Union.
But not with your grades. Okay.
See, so when I left Virginia Union on a 4-point system, I had a 3.97 average in chemistry and math. When I got to Randolph-Macon, even though my understanding was that I was going to move ahead with that, all the grades transferred as other transferring students, which were C's. Mm-hmm. So if you came from some other university as a rising junior, came in as credit, but not the GPA. And I didn't learn that until my senior year, because I was wondering, well, I've got an opportunity now, and I kept my grades high at Randolph-Macon, but it was those C's that kept me out. But I didn't worry too much about it. I mean, after all, I was happy to finish Randolph-Macon, and frankly happy to get out. So I wasn't going to worry about that.
Well, I have to say that. Since I'm the cause of the trouble.
No, the opportunity.
No, the opportunity. Thank you for using that word. These were incredible times that a lot of people listening to this tape will not realize how deep the embedding of this whole ethos of segregation was in Virginia. Throughout many parts, and including the North, but particularly in Virginia. And Hap, when I think about what you went through, and since I'm the cause of you going through that, I'm torn between two things. I'm so happy for you and for Randolph-Macon at what you did, and also so sorry for the fact that you had to go through what you went through. On the other hand, everything in life that's worth anything that I have found, you got to go through there ain't no gain without pain.
That's
and,
right.
And that certainly was pain. But I'm glad you got some good food over there. Because it was terrible food at the cafeteria.
I got very good food.
You got
I do want to talk about that because you graduated in 1968, and in April of 1968, as you mentioned, Martin Luther King was assassinated. I mean, I remember where I was, and I wasn't on the campus at Randolph-Macon like you were. Can you talk about that experience, or was that a significant, or did that factor into your experience?
Well, it factored into my experience because, as I mentioned, I lived in two societies. The interesting thing was that at Randolph-Macon, the majority of, well, I can't say the majority of students, that would be incorrect and a hasty generalization. I would say the small minority who were always very vocal celebrated the assassination. In my dormitory, and those whom I had befriended who got to know me as an individual were very sad and apologetic about what had happened, although certainly it had nothing to do with it. But I felt a sense of camaraderie and support as a result of that on one hand, but then at the other extreme, there were people celebrating and having parties about that. Then, of course, I went home to Richmond, and there were riots in Richmond. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of looting and burning and very poor behavior by many whom I think took advantage of that situation. Because we were all very religious people. So I would say that about sums up my experience. It was yet another dichotomy, both on campus and then looking at the two worlds, the white world, put that in quotes, and the black world, and how many responded. And I think there were bad behaviors on both sides, very bad behaviors on both sides. So that's not something that I would easily excuse.
And that was the beginning of what happened to me a year later when John Gardner called me, because, you know, after there were riots all over the country.
That's right.
In Cleveland, Chicago, New York, Richmond, and et cetera. And John Gardner was trying to help piece that back together, and that's what I raised the money for. And there was another incredible experience of looking to, there are people in the United States of America that were for healing of this incredible problem that Martin Luther King wanted to solve, and what other people felt the other way. So it was a turning point in many, many, many ways. It certainly was a turning point in my life. In fact, at the same time that, and Lord knows where I was, raising money somewhere in the United States for Randolph Macon back when he was killed. But it affected me greatly. But it's interesting. Almost everybody up on that porch, you know, where he was shot, from Jesse Jackson on, after I went with Walker, I got to know all of them. In fact, Jesse Jackson was a client of mine at one time with his group. And I had an experience, HAP, that I'll never forget. Jesse took me to an all-black school in Chicago where he spoke, and he introduced me. He knew I loved to speak, and I'm a preacher at heart. And I spoke to an all-black, I mean, I was the only white person in the room, all students, that Jesse was there. And he introduced me, because Jesse Jackson introduced me, and I spoke, and then I got probably the only standing ovation I've ever gotten from all black students, you know. And it was a high school there. But so many things that are that Martin Luther King thing that affected my life. Little did I know in 1968 that it would, but it did. And I'm blessed because of that. But there's a lot of pain, a lot of pain that came out of that. And what you saw in Richmond and what was going on with a few students at Randolph-Macon, that was it was a turning point in American history. And thank God we had people like Gardner that helped turn it around the other way, because we were heading in some bad directions.
Yes, we were.
After that, we were heading some real bad directions.
Well, then you had moved on.
Well, I was going to make a couple of comments about that. I often raise the question, even in my business life after Randolph-Macon, about people's experiences. For the most part, all of my life has been a situation where I was the minority in a majority culture and in a setting, even in Gulf and Chevron corporations. I was always number one or number two in terms of management team or being in a group. And I've often raised the question in that environment, have you ever thought about how it feels if you were the only white in a group of blacks? And you just described that situation.
I did. I'm telling you, it's
and what were
an
your feelings
experience.
about that when you
Holy
stood before a group
mackerel.
of people and you looked around and there was no one else in the room with your demographics?
I went through everything you experienced at Randolph-Macon. Fear, and
Right.
thank God I was with Jesse, because I didn't think anybody would bother me because I was with him. It was an experience of a lifetime for me, but in a small microcosm, I experienced what you did at Randolph-Macon in that black high school, thanks to Jesse. And a little did I know, it's incredible, the fear, the worry, I mean, the concern, and also you're at a place. This is not my group.
Right.
And what are you going to say? You know, you're going to speak in dialect here. You're going to speak like Doug Lawson with this silly out and about in the house from Tidewater, Virginia. I just spoke my heart, and that's what those students responded to. But boy, you don't know what you're going to do till you get there. When you came to Randolph-Macon, it was exactly like me being in that high school. Whoa. I can't, absolute fear. And then puzzlement, how to act. What are you supposed to do? And there, your Ira Andrews, and I'm sorry it wasn't me, HAP, and raising money, but it was Jesse that kind of put his arms out around me. But afterwards we talked about it, and Jesse Jackson and I, we kind of commiserated on much the same subject we're talking about right now, that he realized that I was experiencing what you experienced, what he had experienced as a black human being. My friend Walker Williams, that I went into business with, I asked him a lot about that, and he took me up to Harlem several times, because when we formed our business in the late 60s, it was still, a white person could not go to Harlem. I mean, incredible. And get back. Right. But I remember he grew up with Dionne Warwick, and she was my favorite singer. And I said, Walker, I want to meet Dionne Warwick. So he said, okay. And so he took me up to Harlem once. I'll never forget that. And getting out of the cab, black man, white man in black country. We went into this home up there, and there was Dionne, and that's how I met her. But would I have gone to that home to meet Dionne Warwick as a white man in Harlem? No. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I have experienced it, HAP, and it's I don't know any other word, frightening. And no matter how much we say, oh yeah, it's not an oh yeah. What HAP went through is indescribable in terms of what a human being has to go through. As the one white person in a black group of people, a one black person in a white. And I think that what I would say is what HAP did for Randolph-Macon and for all of us was incredibly courageous. It's the only way I can say it.
But there were benefits from that. And let me just give you one quick example. I think the Randolph-Macon experience. When I graduated from Randolph-Macon in June of 1968, I had a job offer to teach chemistry and physics in high school, a brand new school opening up in Richmond called John F. Kennedy High School, brand new. But I wasn't to start until September. Well, June of '68 was one of the hottest months ever. And one of the things I wanted to do, because I still live with my parents, moved back to my parents' home, was to buy an air conditioner for the home, because we didn't have any air conditioning in the house. So I wanted to buy 2 air conditioners. In order to do that, I needed a bank loan. So I went to Central National Bank in Richmond, and I talked to the loan officer there, and I said, I'd like to borrow $500 to buy 2 air conditioners for my parents' home. I said, do you have a job? I said, I have a job, but it doesn't begin until September, and I'll be teaching. I said, well, unless you have income now, I can't make this loan. So I was sitting there, and he said, well, maybe there's something we can work out, but I don't think it'll work. I was sitting there with my hands on his desk, and I had my college ring, Randolph-Macon. Bank manager walks by. He looks at me, he looks at the ring, and then he calls the loan officer over. He says, who is that guy? He says, well, he's just finished college, just finished Randolph-Macon, and he wants to buy an air conditioner, but he doesn't have any income. And he said, Macon, huh? He says, a Macon man? He said, give him the loan.
Wow.
Got the loan based on the fact, had no job potential, but no job, no income. But because I finished Randolph-Macon, he said, if you finish Randolph-Macon, give him the loan. You can trust him.
Wow.
And that just...
What a story.
Oh, well, that's incredible.
God.
I left there, my head was that big.
That's a story and a half. Woo.
That's wonderful. And I want to thank you, too, for, you said you didn't come to Randolph-Macon to break any color barrier. You came to get an education, but you, in fact, did pave the way. And when you graduated in June of '68, the following fall, I think there were 3 African Americans in the freshman class in '68. But I know Dennis Howard, whom I've interviewed, was in that class that came in the fall and graduated, and would actually, by the time he was a senior, so 4 years after your graduation, you didn't think of yourself as a trailblazer or coming to do that, but in 4 years, the president of the student body was an African American. And I'm sure you never would have dreamed that yourself.
No. But not surprising, because I think that Randolph-Macon recruits the best and brightest. And if you're going to bring someone into an environment in which they are one of a very few, then you want to get the best you can, and you want to make sure that there's an opportunity for success. Otherwise, you can destroy a person not only academically, but intellectually. And Macon is not about doing that. So it is not surprising to me that that individual truly distinguished himself, not only by becoming a student, being accepted at Randolph-Macon, but then making a commitment to the college to deliver the best he could possibly deliver. And so that is not unusual, not surprising to me at least.
Well, just to close, I want to thank you both so much for your time this morning and your candid sharing of your stories. I'm going to just give you each an opportunity in closing to consider what are the lessons learned for Randolph-Macon from your experiences.
Be happy to. I think first and foremost, Randolph-Macon is a family. And I can tell you that having graduated over 40 years ago, that it's been an integral part of my life. And it helped shape values that I took with me into business. Now, I've always said in my business environment and in the academic environment that I was raised well by, I had excellent parents. I was raised well. They set forth the certain values that I cherish. But Randolph-Macon also reinforced that and developed a sense of self, a sense of authenticity, and a stronger sense of integrity. And then there's a Southern chivalry. There's a certain something special, a little lagniappe, as folks in New Orleans would say, a little something extra. And that I've taken with me into business, such that the individuals with whom I've worked, the individuals whom I've had the pleasure to lead, say, you have something different. There's something different about you. Is it because you're from the South? What is it? I'd say, I had a very good education. I said I was taught how to work well with others. I was taught to respect others. And because I have been challenged as an individual in my life, I will make sure that you are respected, that you don't have those kinds of challenges. Now, every now and then you get pulled through the knothole. You have to address that. But I think it was Jack Welch who said, and I firmly believe this, that the experiences that you had in life, Jack Welch, former chairman of GE, said that three of the things that you need to do is, one, you have to be comfortable in a global setting because we are now a global economy. And I think my experiences at Randolph-Macon helped shape my views of the world such that I'm comfortable anywhere in the world that I go. The second thing is to be able to motivate people. And you motivate people through respect and acknowledgement for the contributions that they make. You can get farther along your business strategy, farther along the line, if you respect the people with whom you work, regardless of the positions they have. You can be the CEO of the organization, or you can be the person in the mailroom. Each has a role, each has a contribution to make. And in order for the entire organization to be successful, you have to have everybody working at their best. At Randolph-Macon, we were taught to do the best we could possibly do. And finally is endless amount of energy. In any setting, the work at Randolph-Macon was non-trivial. It was difficult work, but it required a lot of energy and a lot of perseverance. And I think that's something that translates and moves on to business and into careers. So those are the three that I would highlight and say, thanks to Randolph-Macon, I'm certainly very appreciative of Randolph-Macon and the experiences that I had here and the shaping that it helped me become as an individual. And I think from that point, I certainly have no regrets. And I'm very thankful. And it is a family. Proud to be a member of it.
I couldn't say it better. HAP, that was my experience. I went on to 2 other universities, 10 years of higher education, and I used to laugh to myself when the Duke University, which is one of the great universities, and a foundation for what it's all about at Randolph-Macon. I think the foundation that I built my life on, and certainly my academic career after that, was at Randolph-Macon. And that family that you talked about was a family that it gave me birth, to a life that's been absolutely incredible. But the academic foundation of that little college in Virginia is phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. Now, I've had the privilege of working with great universities, great liberal arts colleges all over the world. And in Africa, in Abuja, Nigeria, working with Nelson Mandela's African University of Science and Technology, all the way to little colleges and big universities in the United States. I've never seen a better academic background than what I was given at Randolph-Macon. And I have to laugh. Yale, that I did not go to, Yale 25 years ago put me on the board of their divinity school, and I've helped them raise a lot of money up there, and et cetera. But I'll never forget the first meeting of the board. Everybody went around the circle and say, well, I'm Joe Schmo, and I went to Yale and such and such, and they came to me and I said, well, I'm Doug Lawson, and I went to a four-letter word school too, but it's not spelled Y-A-L-E, it's spelled D-U-K-E, and they all laughed. But I said, there's another school that I went to that there's a little longer than a four-letter word called Randolph-Macon. And it was amazing how many people there at Yale knew Randolph-Macon. They all knew Duke, but they knew Randolph-Macon. And my feeling is that what it did for HAP and what it did for me, it started us out in life, you in business and me in the world that I've lived in, as a foundation upon which you can build a life. And I think it's still that way. And by the way, after HAP integrated the school, okay, there were no women there. Then after I left, then finally we really integrated the school with not only blacks but women. And now it's really a strong school because we've got the other gender there. But they are my thoughts about this incredible place that I had the privilege of being the person that came up with the crazy idea that ended up with this beautiful person, HAP, as the first person to integrate that school.
And I'd like to take a moment to, first of all, this is not quite an epilogue yet, but to thank you, Professor Wright, for giving us the opportunity to share our memories with you and with the college. I think that's extraordinary, and your efforts to bring us together, most appreciated from the heart. And you, sir, I just want to stand up and shake your hand and thank you for the opportunity for reshaping my life and pushing me in the right direction.
Well, thank you, HAP. It's incredible. That handshake, which you witnessed, Professor, was monumental. Thank you, HAP.
Thank you both so much for participating in Making Memories.